But I have this uncontrollable impulse to take notes all the time because I did that for so many years, and I said I'm not going to take notes today.
John,
I got it right
when we
here.
start, you want to turn one of those lights out.
And
Who are we missing? John? I love my little yellow posts. I love my little yellow posts. Nobody's run into it yet.
That's a win.
That's a win-win. That's a win-win. That is a win-win. Oh, yes. A win and a win and a
On hold.
win.
For a minute.
Who's the presenter? Is that her up there in the corner?
yours?
No, that's,
With the hair behind her head there? I thought she looked familiar.
This is phenomenal.
Okay.
It was laying right there, so I thought it was yours.
Some stuff on
Let's
it.
see, here you go.
I don't
Change
even
my
know.
consent.
Okay, well, good.
Sure.
I smell it on me.
Did you put on clothes, shirt? You just come straight from work, didn't you?
I didn't work today,
Oh, okay.
but I did put some green shirts. My other
While we're waiting on one more member to come, if everyone that has a cell phone, if you'll go ahead and mute your cell phones or turn them off so we don't be interrupted during our meeting, sure would be appreciative. We're just waiting on one of our council members that's on his way, so he'll be here in just a second, then we'll start.
One of our members. Is that a cross pen? My daddy loved cross pens, and his gift to people was a set of cross pens. And he had engraved cross pens. Well, see, he's in law enforcement, and he always had his cross pen in his nickel-plated pocket, and he was a striking pose there with that nickel pistol and them cross pen. Yeah. They're good. I mean, they are excellent pens, but you seldom see them anymore. Oh, there you go. If Daddy's still alive, he'd probably give you a set. He was like yourself. Daddy liked to dress nicely, and he's very professional. I take more after my mom. If we're dressed when we go out the door, he'll do it. I've still got.
Is she on? Didn't she fall?
She did. She hurt her back a little, but she's doing okay, and she didn't break anything. And she's taking it a little easy. She fell up around the bar. She's got pneumonia.
Yeah. That's what they do. And I had one
But she's doing well.
Jack went one way and I went the other.
And her, John said they went today. He's got a surgeon. Well, John said they went to Crackle there. Went to Crackle.
I got it.
No, I didn't use it like, I don't know where you did it.
She went to stay with
It's your responsibility to keep up.
I saw a picture of her down there. I saw that. I guess it's really down there.
I was playing golf Saturday at about 103
She was John leaving.
I don't know, I've been through so many
How are you?
stories with him.
Almost as good.
So many.
No, I don't have to. I've got a good one for Lee for them.
The roads are very nice that they finished. So, well, but now I'm especially pleased that we got Mr. Zach's road fixed over there so people can go back to speeding because it's so rough that they couldn't speed over there.
We should live.
But now I think they'll be able to speed again. I told my friend Greg, I went by there and said, I said, he'll be calling, he'll be up there to next meeting if they're speeding.
Yes, there he is. We clap. Somebody's ready to remember clap.
John, you're real close, brother. And that's all right.
I was gonna be early.
I know you're from.
All right. We're ready to roll. All right.
Go ahead.
At this time, we'll call the meeting to order for the Sparta Town Council, and I'll turn it over to Commissioner Irwin.
Well, go ahead for the county commissioners, and we'll call the meeting to order. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. Wes, you want to lead us?
Everyone, please stand. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Everyone can be seated. This time, I'll ask the Sparta Town Council to approve our agenda.
So moved.
Motion and a second. All in favor, show of hands, please. 4-0 on that.
At this time, I'll ask the county commissioners to approve the agenda as submitted. Motion and a second.
Second.
All those in favor, raise your hand. Opposed, likewise, motion carries. I'll turn this back over to Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, appreciate that. Tonight, we have a presentation of the Sparta Strategic Economic Development Plan. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Libby and Ms. Megan to come on up and share their findings.
All right. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. John?
All right.
Come on.
Are we all right? Oh, now it's a party. Okay. Thank you very much for having us this evening. I'm very excited to be here with my amazing team. My name is Libby Crimmings. I'm president at Atlas Community Studios, and I'm here with Megan Tebby and Kate Green and Alex Holland, who is on the cloud somewhere. You can't see her face, but she's joining us remotely. We are very excited to be back in Sparta. This is absolutely one of our favorite places that we've had the pleasure to work with. So I'm here to kind of kick off the conversation this evening, and then we're going to be kind of passing it back and forth. Our whole team participated in this planning process, and so we're here to present the final findings and recommendations to you this evening. And then we hope to be able to answer some questions, and then we will give you the entire report to review after we talk about it this evening. So to get us started, as a quick background introduction, the town of Sparta was awarded the USDA Rural Business Development Grant last fall, which feels like a lifetime ago already, doesn't it? Time isn't real anymore, so it doesn't matter, but in support of updating the 2015 strategic plan. In this process, we had the pleasure to partner with the town of Sparta, as well as our preferred partners, Broad Ripple Strategies. And this project was supposed to be focused on 4 key opportunity areas: public infrastructure and transportation, workforce development, small business and entrepreneurship, arts, culture, and tourism. So as a quick overview of the timeline, phase one included research and public engagement. We've already had the pleasure to work with Sparta in the past, and so we were really excited to kind of jump back in and kind of pick up where we left off. Reviewing past plans. You have lots of great stuff already to work with, and so we're not reinventing the wheel every time we do a planning process. If you do it correctly, you should be able to look back at all the work and effort you've already done in the past and be able to figure out what were the priorities before, what's still a priority, what worked, what didn't work, and then, you have limited time and money and resources, which who doesn't, right? So this findings is basically going to tell us, with your limited time, money, and resources, where are your best bets to be able to put those. So we did public engagement, site visit, focus groups, stakeholder interviews. Our job is to listen and learn and to understand, what do people feel? What are some of the challenges here? What are some of the opportunities? And how can we use some of the assets you currently have to be able to address some of those challenges that you're facing? The community assessment is when we partnered with Broad Ripple Strategies, so that's taking a really deep dive both into the qualitative and the quantitative inputs. Sometimes, public perception is different than what the data says. And so being able to really dig into those pieces all under one roof and figure out, what are those common threads, right? What are the things we heard over and over? What are the key trends? What are the challenges? And most importantly and excitingly, what are the opportunities ahead of you? The final phase, which is why we're here today, is to roll out the Strategic Economic Development Plan. We worked with a core team and worked on project identification, prioritization, again, figuring out where you're going to focus your efforts. So today is the day we are officially launching it, and after this we will actually give you the full piece. Okay, so in the last strategic plan, the 2015 plan, which was a partnership between Alleghany County and the town of Sparta, these were the visions that were specifically identified. And so it's to promote an environment where the economy can grow by fostering job creation that will nurture and support opportunities for our citizens throughout Alleghany County, and to promote the retention and expansion of existing businesses, recruitment of new businesses, development of the tourism and agricultural industries, and provide opportunities for our youth, families, and community to succeed. How many of you already had that memorized and you knew it, right? Yeah? Okay. I assumed. All right, so with the new vision, for this new plan, what we really wanted it to do is just boil it down as much as we possibly could. Now, this is our recommendation for this plan process, is very simply to build a healthy, prosperous, and resilient community. I want something real short and sweet and something that you can remember. So all roads lead to building a healthy, prosperous, and resilient community. And that's what we're trying to achieve in this planning process. And then we named the plan Elevate and Accelerate Advance Alleghany 2028. So this is recommendations over the next 5 years. Some of the things will take longer, but we wanted to be able to give you a really focused effort on where do you put those now. Long-term plans are excellent because, of course, you got to be thinking about the future, but we also wanted to have it be challenging and realistic all at the same time. And for this piece, I'm going to hand it over to Megan to give a quick overview of the community assessment piece.
Hi everyone, I'm Megan. I'm fortunate to work with you all again and very happy to be back in Sparta. So we were able to present a more in-depth presentation to the town council for the community assessment, but to just give you a kind of recap, since I know Okay. Since I know that we have not formally presented that to the county commissioners. But as Libby mentioned, this was conducted or completed in the phase 2 portion, where we gathered all of the quantitative data, which includes, census data, population trends, economic data, things like that, and then partnered it with the qualitative data, which is what Libby was able to gather when she visited Sparta in March and was able to conduct focus groups and interviews with people with key stakeholders within the community and county. And so all of that was collected and analyzed to identify the key trends, issues, and opportunities that Sparta and Alleghany County are currently facing, especially in terms of economic development. And so the point of this community assessment report is to really lay the groundwork for the plan. And so I'm not going to go too into detail, but we can share that with you all, county commissioners, if you guys haven't seen that, and with anyone else too that would really love to dive into all of the data like I love to. But as I mentioned, it goes over population trends, economic and place-based trends, arts and cultural trends, things like that. And I will hand it over to Alex, who is on Zoom, but you obviously cannot see her.
Hi, everybody. Just want to make sure that everyone can hear me.
Did you hear us? Yeah.
Can you hear us, Alex?
I can.
Okay.
Great. Well, hey, everybody. Alex Hahn, CEO at Atlas Community Studios. I am based in D.C. and have spent much of my career in rural economic development, really looking to connect communities and organizations to federal funding opportunities so that they can advance their priorities and implement projects. So this is a really exciting project for me to work on as well. And one thing that I think is really interesting about where we meet here is that we were going to approach this project very differently. And I think that that's something that...
Hey, Alex. Sorry, we're having some audio issues.
Okay.
1 second. Alex, do you want to speak now? See if that changed.
Can you hear me better?
It's a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Go ahead.
Do I need to start over?
Yeah, why don't you?
Okay, no problem. I love reintroducing myself. Anyways, thanks everybody. Alex Holland, CEO at Atlas Community Studios. I'm based in DC and have been here since January of 2016, but I've spent much of my career in rural economic development, looking to connect communities to federal funding opportunities so they can advance their priorities and implement projects. So this is an exciting project for our team to work on, and I think really kind of leans into some of our skill sets. But one of the things that I wanted to touch on first before we jump into the strategic recommendations was that we really switched up our approach in this plan sort of midway through, because what we recognized was we had this really robust plan that was developed in 2015, and there were a lot of really awesome ideas and projects that we wanted to get accomplished. But along the way, we sort of realized that there wasn't a centralized structure to kind of support economic development. So what we wanted to do with this plan was really think through how we can sort of form that, even if it is not completely formalized in an economic development organization, but even starting from square one to really start to build out that coalition between the county and the town and other organizations that can support economic and community development efforts. So what you'll see on the screen there sort of identifies that vulnerability, but what we see in some of our weaknesses also turns into opportunity, right? And so we thought this would be a really good approach to take a look at this plan as something that can sort of set the foundation for supporting economic development efforts, both in the county and also in the town. And when we think about just overall economic competitiveness, what we're seeing with all this historic levels of federal investment is that it's really difficult to compete for those funds if you're not coming at it with more of a regional approach. And that's been a pretty common theme in economic development for the last 5 to 7 years. There's sort of this turfism that is starting to be minimized, and we're starting to realize we really need to work together, not just county and county, but looking at multi-county jurisdictions to go after some of these funds that can have really major impact in our community. So that's just to set the stage, but I want to jump into the strategic recommendations now. We want to start with defining economic development. So I'm going to define economic development with these very ridiculous images that you see on the screen there. IEDC, the International Economic Development Council, actually defines economic development as a program, group of policies, or set of activities that seeks to improve the economic well-being and quality of life for a community by creating and or retaining jobs that facilitate growth and provide a stable tax base. But what we've started to see in economic development over the years is that a lot of times communities and organizations are looking at the whale hunt, right? And the whale hunt represents industrial recruitment. What we know about that is it can be incredibly expensive and it can also be time consuming. What we also know is that the two metrics that we have used forever in economic development to evaluate success is job creation and private capital investment. But we know now in modern economic development that those two metrics alone are not adequate enough to assess our successes in economic development. We really need to be looking at quality of place and quality of life as well. But the bigger piece here is looking over at the tropical fish. What the tropical fish represent is how we leverage our unique assets to support existing businesses and entrepreneurs in our communities. This can also be time consuming, but you have a much greater return on investment. We often know that businesses that already exist in our community, the people that already exist in our community, are actually our best investment. They are a lot more likely to stay, and they are a lot easier to retain than for us to attract other companies and other people into our community. If we invest in them first, you're going to see that businesses are going to start to say, hey, I need to go pay attention to them, and maybe that's a good place for me to do business, because I see how they treat others. One example of this, community in Alabama had a huge mega site. They would not allow any company to move in there unless they were going to create more than 1,000 jobs. They waited more than 15 years. It finally happened. Unfortunately, what they're dealing with right now is the fallout of not having the correct workforce. There's not enough workers to take those jobs and very little housing. So now, of course, they're having to look at a more regional approach to how they're going to fill those jobs, how they're going to get people housed, how they're going to create a quality of place and a quality of life that people want and deserve. So just an example of how we need to be investing in our people and our businesses first. The last thing I'll say about economic development, too many people think that it is about economic growth. It is truly about developing the economy, and unfortunately, you're going to see that ebb and flow. It's not always just going to be a steady positive trajectory. And so that's where I just want to have a common understanding of how we're approaching this. But now I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Kate to talk about collaboration.
Hey everybody, Kate Green. This is my first time in Sparta. Happy to be here. I am a West Virginia girl though, so I drove those country roads right into your little town today, and it was beautiful. So very excited to be here. I kind of mentioned that to say that, you know, when Alex was talking earlier about this vulnerability and opportunity piece, you know, and those vulnerabilities of maybe not having a dedicated organization that's focused on, you know, economic development efforts. The opportunity that's represented in that is that y'all have had a lot of successes. You've completed projects and you've finished projects, sometimes in the absence of that thing. And to me, that really speaks to, like for me, that resonates with me, kind of in my West Virginia Appalachian heritage, you know, we're just recognizing that's how we do stuff. Like we make it work, we pull together and we get it done. And so that is an opportunity here. And that's, you know, it really kind of speaks into the regional collaboration piece, right? The benefit of collaborating and working together is recognizing that we might not always have all of the things that we need here, but we know that we can reach out beyond ourselves to our neighbors and to people that are close by and pull together to make the kind of change that we need to make. And so, you know, by working together and you know, kind of looking to what opportunities exist with your neighbors, you can increase your capacity here, and kind of really build a coordinated approach to grow, I think, in a more authentic and deeper way. You know, like Alex said, it's not just about economic growth, it's about regional growth. So again, with the idea of collaboration, one of the things that is really critical to this process is having that entity and having some sort of central focused, somebody, some group, one person, someone, something that is really focused on building that economic development effort. And so this idea of developing a structure to actually support that kind of work. And it doesn't have to look any certain way. It can be one entity. It can be, and you'll hear us refer to economic development organizations. I think that is the gold standard, this idea that there is going to be an organization that has people rolling in every day, showing up to work, clocking in, and they are there for the economic growth of the county, of the area. But that doesn't have to be the place that we start. But that group or that person, whoever is highly focused and dedicated on that work, is going to be able to determine those priorities. They're going to be able to nurture and grow those strategic partnerships, and they're going to be able to kind of constantly be working to forward and build on the momentum that y'all have already built here. So what we have done is we have proposed kind of just a couple of different options. One of the exciting things for us when we started really digging into this is to realize that there is a history of strong collaboration here. We found information about the Alleghany County Economic Development Corporation that appears to still be functioning, but maybe not serving in a full capacity. And what an incredible opportunity that's just kind of right there at your fingertips, just to re-engage in that space, just to kind of reactivate that. With the full support of the region. The way that the language is built about that, it is designed to be a tool for the county and the town to work together to advocate for growth. But then again, recognizing if for some reason, if that is not an option the way that it's designed, maybe there's an opportunity to rewrite the language of that organization to continue serving. It's already there, it's already built, it already has assets associated with it. So what a really great opportunity for you just to dig into that existing resource and build it back up together. On the off chance that there's not an interest or if there's some reason that organization maybe has fallen to the wayside or cannot be reactivated, but there's still a regional, if there's not a hyper, regional interest right at the moment, it's the kind of idea that can also be activated just independently. So maybe it's something that the town of Sparta would stand up on their own with, a nod toward supporting growth in the county and kind of leaving that space open. And then the other option is just to invest in the existing resources, because obviously standing up an organization, finding funding, finding people to do it, maybe that's not realistic in this moment. I think the most important thing is to not let perfect be the enemy of the good. It's important just to make sure that you lean into this idea of getting someone in your circle, in this place, fully dedicated to moving things forward. And so if that is one person as part of the community, if it's building an ad hoc group, pulling together those same people that worked together so much over the past couple of years to implement these wonderful programs and projects that you have, but just kind of continuing working toward that gold standard so that you have that force that's kind of consistently working to move you forward. And that kind of comes back to this idea of staffing, right? Because again, if we're talking about standing up an organization, that can feel a little bit overwhelming. And so if the opportunity is there, if it's just a reallocation of existing, funding, if it's whatever that solution might be, if it can be done, great. If it can't, exploring different options. And so within the context of this plan, we do present a couple of different options. One could be, yes, we're going to have a dedicated director of this organization. We're going to figure out a way to fund it. We're going to make it happen. It could be, finding somebody on your staff that maybe they're going to be part-time doing that work, et cetera. Or it could again be that idea of that advisory board coming together, working towards this long-term goal. And then Megan will talk about partnerships.
So as a key part of this, I think that we've honed in on is collaboration among the partners that are here in Sparta and within the county. We've been very fortunate to meet with a lot of them. Not only do you guys have great organizations, but you have a strong local business culture. We've met with some of the major companies here, like NAPCO and Parkdale. We've also been able to meet with Wilkes and the Alleghany Writers and the Alleghany Arts Council, especially additionally, the strong local businesses like Sparta Candle Company, who our entire team is obsessed with, and Muddy Creek. And so I think you can see the support that the community already gives to Sparta and the county by the participation of people showing up here and wanting to listen to this plan and hear how it can really support that collaborative model that we're proposing. And so we just want to reiterate how it's not just the sole, EDO person, like Kate said. They will be tapping into the local, regional, state, and federal partners that can support the projects that we're going to talk about.
Speaking of Sparta Candle Company, here's a pretty photo of it. This is really simple too, of just making sure that you are, again, with limited time and money and resources, putting your marketing efforts into the right places. So figuring out who are those target audiences, who are you trying to attract to help grow your community, and really focusing on, building your brand for Sparta, for Alleghany, for the region's EDO, and having a clear marketing plan, because that's a really difficult thing. Are you successful? I don't know. What's the plan? What am I holding myself accountable for? And so making sure that it's number one, you have a website, so information is really easy to find. As somebody who has done an incredible amount of Googling on Sparta and Alleghany, it is actually really difficult to find information sometimes. So if I was looking at moving here or starting a business or moving my family or something and trying to find even just some critical information, trying to find the right places to get that information can be really difficult. So it can even just be really simple. Landing page with some basic information, and then cross promotion to make sure that you are pointing people in the right direction of where do you find this stuff. Of course, social media is not just fun, but also a really great way, again, to build your brand and to push it out to the universe. And maybe it's not to the universe, maybe it's to the region, maybe it's to North Carolina. Again, it's focusing on who is your target audience. Public relations opportunities, again, how do you get yourself out there and make sure that people know that Sparta is an incredible place to live and to work and to visit. And of course, promotional materials. The challenging thing with marketing these days is that there are a billion different ways to reach people. There are so many different methods of communication, and none of them are necessarily better than other ones, and it's really challenging when some people are on Facebook and some people aren't, and some people read the paper and some people listen to the radio. So it can be extremely overwhelming. But again, really narrowing down and figuring out what are the most critical pieces, where do you need to meet your audience, and how do you get in front of them is going to be a really important part of this EDO's marketing plan.
When it comes to funding, it's definitely one of the most difficult things to do, especially when we are looking for operational expenses to be supported. There are so many different things that are running through this presentation, through this plan, but some of the biggest are regionalism, collaboration, developing partnerships, and you're going to see that running through this funding section as well when you're able to read the plan. There are very few EDOs, if any, that are able to rely on one source of funding. And so what we have recommended are a number of different ways that we can seek out funding, giving you guys some ideas of how we can support this so that it's not just taxpayer dollars that are going into an economic development organization or just in economic development efforts as they stand, but that we're able to tap into a number of different sources, a number of different ideas and methods so that we can continue to generate some funding and support our economic development efforts in Sparta and in the county. The next slide here, you're going to see just where we stand budget-wise. What you're going to see on the screen is a percentage of the budget that each of these government bodies spend on economic development. And I'll preface that by saying that this is just the part of your budget that says we are specifically spending on economic development. So you might argue we've got, infrastructure that we're funding and we're supporting our workforce by doing this and our businesses by doing this. This is just specifically economic development fund. And it's a really good exercise to look at it from a regional lens, to look at all these different counties to see, okay, how much are they putting in versus us? All this to say, the most money into economic development does not always equal the most success. However, like with anything, you're going to get a higher quality product or a higher quality service if you spend a little more money. So this is a way to look at, economic development as an investment and not necessarily as an expense. So as we're planning, our budgets in the coming years, I'm hopeful that what we can do is leverage this public investment with private investment and other revenue generating activities so that we can put together a pretty substantial economic development fund, more than what we've seen in years past in Florida. I'll pass over to Kate.
So one of the things that is really important to, if we're talking about, return on investment and really understanding how your efforts are paying off, is to establish some performance measurements. And so another thing that is incorporated into this plan is a way for the EDO to kind of measure the progress and the impact of the projects that they prioritize. And I think that, being able to do that is going to make sure that you are effectively measuring and that you can look back and say, we said that we were going to do X, Y, and Z. And this was our plan to do those things because we really thought this is how they were going to pay out. And if you look down the road and see that you accomplished all the things that you wanted to accomplish and yet the needle didn't move the way that you wanted to, it gives you an opportunity to reassess and say, you know what, maybe we need to rethink the way that we thought that was going to work out for us. The other thing that's included in, you can go to the next slide, Megan. The other thing that's included, is that the next one for me? I'm sorry. No, on to the next one. Okay, I thought it was going to go on to the priority projects, so. I think it is Alex.
Yeah, I'll jump back in here. So, again, so we kind of went through what these potential structures could look like to support economic development, whether it be a bit more formalized or it be a bit less formal. The other thing that we added in the strategic plan was a look at our key assets and how we're going to promote those to support our economic development efforts, as well as some priority projects. And we'll talk about how we prioritize those in a minute. But I'm going to start by saying that it is so incredibly important in economic development to really know your product. And a lot of people will say that means we've got to know our infrastructure, we need to know our workforce, we need to know our quality of life amenities that we offer. There's a number of different things that I just mentioned that we're going to talk through, but making sure that you can really speak very clearly, concisely to business prospects, to site selectors, to people who are looking to move to our community. If we don't know our own community, we can't sell it. And we have to be the greatest champion for our community when we're going to try to attract and retain businesses. And that's actually where I'm going to start, is in business attraction and retention, which is really, really fundamental to economic development. And again, what we tried to do in this plan was to take a look at what the region's competitive advantages were, understanding our key industries and what might make them want to relocate or expand in the area. And so what we tried to do here was to just perhaps make some recommendations on how you can attract businesses that align with a number of different things: your economic strengths, your resources, your strategic goals, your priorities. But we tried to do this in a way that was a little bit more data-driven. So we didn't just guess who your key industries were. We actually took a look at the data to see where is there a concentration, what looks like it can grow and be successful here. And that's how we built out this section here. So going on to the next slide, you'll see the top 3 industries for Alleghany County are agriculture, forestry, fishing, and hunting, arts, entertainment and recreation, and manufacturing. You'll see that it says an LQ, and that is a location quotient, essentially looking at the concentration of these industries based on jobs as well as average annual wages. And the way that you can also look at LQs is to see, are these industries growing by wages and by jobs? Are they decreasing? And so on. Anything above 1.25 means you have a concentration in those areas. So agriculture, forestry, fishing, and hunting is going to be your greatest concentration. But these are still the top 3 industries that Alleghany County should be pushing, should be marketing to. These companies beyond the LQs, you'll see here, were identified because their industry matches the assets that you have, your competitive advantages. They coincide with Sparta and Alleghany County development goals, and hopefully have some growth potential in the area and can help you diversify your local economy. But how do we go after and market to these industries? So again, whether this be an EDO or this be something that's done in-house, marketing is going to be incredibly important. The website that Libby mentioned earlier is something that's going to be a huge tool when people are doing what they call desktop research. You see that a lot of site selectors, they won't even come to your community before they do some pretty intensive desktop research. They want to see what you've got going on online. They're going to do a huge data pull too, but seeing that you've got this information ready and available is going to be huge. And there's a number of different ways that you can support your marketing efforts through this. You'll see we've got industry-specific marketing, doing all these things digitally, whether that be on websites, social media, cross-collaboration and making sure that we're using and marketing through our partners as well is going to be really big. A lot of people in economic development still do, events and trade shows, whether that be going to economic development conferences or going to some of the big trade shows across the country to market to some of the companies that are looking to relocate or expand. Understanding the incentives that North Carolina has to offer, and even if there are some that are regional or local, companies of course are going to want to look at those things too and what they have to support them. And making sure that you're really building your brand so that you're doing the direct outreach to some of these companies, to some of these industries, and really understanding some of their needs is really, really important. And there are a number of ways that we can sort of manage those prospects or leads that we're reaching out to. Perhaps they're reaching out to us. Perhaps it's the state that is able to send you a request for information, which happens a lot of times. When they believe that your region has something to offer and can compete for some of these companies that are looking at the state of North Carolina, you want to be able to be ready for that, and you also want to be able to maintain some of this information for your records. And so we have a couple of recommendations in the plan to help you do this. CRM, customer relationship management software, can be a little bit expensive, but you can always build a database internally with a simple spreadsheet, but it's a really helpful tool. It's very good to have for reporting purposes. Again, if this were to be something that were a little bit more structured as an EDO, or if it were to be something that's housed within one of the government bodies, you're going to want to be able to report not only to your board or the council, but also to your constituents and remain accountable with them. The last thing I'll say about this is that business attraction is only one facet of economic development, and it is not necessarily the biggest one. It is just one that historically more people have focused on. But I think moving on into business retention and expansion is actually going to be the more important program that Sparta and Alleghany County really go after. So next slide there, Megan. You'll see here on the right-hand side, studies have shown that businesses already in a community are responsible for up to 80% of all net needed jobs. That's a huge, huge number. And so when I say that it is expensive and time-consuming to go whale hunting, this is what I mean by supporting the existing businesses that you have in your community. There are so many different strategies for how you can support and establish a business retention and expansion program, but ultimately what we need to know is this is about keeping our businesses and our community here, making sure that they feel supported, because ultimately, the day that a site selector doesn't notify the county or the town or anybody that they're coming in and they're talking to some of our business folks, they're going to be asking how they're treated there. Are they responsive to your needs? Do they understand your challenges? This is why this is going to be so, so important, and it's also a pretty cost-effective way to support economic development. It involves quite a bit of communication with businesses pretty regularly, and we'll talk about a couple of the strategies that we can incorporate here on the next slide. So at a base level, and we explained this pretty in-depthly in the plan itself, a business retention and expansion program incorporates most of the following things that you see here. We're assessing our businesses to make sure that they're doing okay, to see if they have any expansion needs, maybe they're needing some assistance with capital funding, maybe they're having workforce challenges. So making sure that we are on a first-name basis with our businesses is going to be important. Sometimes they just need assistance with policy advocacy and making sure that they're working in a pretty business-friendly environment. And if there's some changes that we can be made, we can help them with that. A lot of times we're hearing about workforce challenges, and that's not just in North Carolina, that's all across the country. But what can we do to then support them? There are so many training programs out there that we can use to help existing companies or companies that are hoping to relocate to our area. Let's try to meet them where they're at and help them out. You'll see a couple of other things here, but the last thing I want to point out is ongoing support and engagement. Making sure that we have a representative who our businesses know is going to be the most important part of the business retention and expansion program, and something I certainly urge that we do no matter what the structure of our economic development efforts. A couple more slides here on business attraction and retention. One of the things that was really important to us was making sure that we mentioned a couple of questions that we thought an EDO or whoever's holding these economic development responsibilities should ask about their assets. One, what is most important to the businesses that will allow it to grow or expand here? And two, what is most important to the workforce who will be calling our community home? Because we have to be thinking about not just the businesses and not just the workforce, but we have to think about both. And they each have different priorities, and so there's going to be a fine balance with how we're able to support both our business community and our workforce. But ultimately, businesses don't exist without the workforce. So really thinking about how we're investing in our quality of place and quality of life are going to be important. It's going to be important to businesses too, because they're going to need to be able to attract and retain their workforce. And so on the next slide, you're going to see all the different assets that we have put together in terms of what we think you really need to hone in on and understand. And also invest in. Everything from infrastructure to workforce to real estate, natural resources. You should be promoting your location, where you're at. Access to transportation, what incentives the state might be able to offer, what sort of education or training programs do you have in the area. So it's a pretty holistic view of what you can offer both the business and the workforce, and we have a bit more information about what those things might be for the area. But I'm going to transition now to talk a little bit about workforce, and this slide essentially reiterates everything that I've been saying, that without a good workforce, you're not going to be able to support your existing businesses, and businesses aren't necessarily going to relocate either. So on the next slide, you'll see all the information that we need to know at the back of our hand. We have all of this in the community assessment report. So you've got the most current information, but this is something that we're going to have to very regularly update. So just make sure to be mindful of that. There are a number of roles that an EDO can play to really support the workforce system, but we're essentially being the bridging the gap between businesses and the workforce, training providers, and wraparound services, making sure that all of these different organizations are served and are serving each other. And that this, of course, will assist with job creation as well as job retention. There's some key assets that we need to consider, and we highlighted these in the plan and sort of did some of the homework for you. But looking at our K-12 system and really promoting what's good about that, our colleges and even universities that are located in the region. We know we don't have a four-year institution in the county, but what are we nearby? Any sort of technical or vocational schools or programs, workforce development board and everything that they can offer. And I think something that is relatively unique to your area is just the remote work opportunities that you have given your broadband connectivity. And the last thing for me is just talking about your infrastructure. This is, of course, going to be very critical to businesses, and we're going to have a bunch of different needs here. But we really need to be able to understand our capacity for our utilities, what our transportation assets are, just making sure that we understand rail and highway, waterways, all those different things, as well as available sites and buildings. And I know that last one can be pretty limited, but even if you just have one or two spots that you can market, that's going to be important to make sure that you are marketing to businesses and doing a very regular inventory. And so the next slide, you're going to see some of the key assets that we actually a bit more specifically talk about in the plan. But these are all the things that companies are going to want to understand is certain capacities that you have for all these different things, proximity to some of these assets such as highways and airports. And just so they can sort of make some of the business decisions that they need to make. You're going to have a manufacturing company and a data center that need two very different utility services, so making sure you understand that is going to be important. But now, something that's maybe a little bit more fun is going into quality of place, so I'll pass it over to Libby.
All right. So there's two different measurements here. Quality of place generally refers to the physical built environment as well as the natural environment. So you can think about it like your physical and your social infrastructure, right? So you can create a really great place. You can't guarantee a really great quality of life, right? But it's really hard to imagine a great quality of life in a low quality place. So quality of place influences quality of life. And the quality of life refers to the overall health, comfort, happiness, general well-being of an individual or with groups. And the most important role for quality of place and quality of life that an EDO can do is really to be a champion and to be a connector and to be a convener, to get people together to make sure that we're putting our efforts into building the best possible quality of place for your current and future residents. And these are a few. Unfortunately, there is not a universally accepted, everybody agrees this is what the definition of quality of place is. But these are some of the key assets. There's a million different ways you can define it, but how do you measure it, right? Like how do you say, when I talk to people in Sparta, everybody told me what a great place this is. And how do you measure that if you're actually trying to make sure that you are achieving your goals? So these are some of the indicators that you can quantify, you can put down on paper, and you can say, these are the things we're going to focus on. So here's 6 examples of key assets that you can focus on for quality of place. And for our final home stretch, just keep in mind, this is a really big plan. We worked very hard on it, and we're trying to do it in an hour for you. So I'm going to pass this over back to Kate.
These are the slides I was expecting earlier that I was waiting for. So there are a bunch of ideas, and there are a bunch of really cool things to tackle. And one of the things that we are fond of saying is you can do it all, but you can't do it all at once. And having so many opportunities can be both incredibly exciting and feel incredibly overwhelming because you do have limited capacity, limited resource, limited time. And so one of the things that we have done is to develop develop some sort of a little bit of a framework that you can use to prioritize projects. And so it really, it literally is a tool that we've kind of designed with some measures. Obviously, it can be changed if y'all look at it and say, we need to tweak this, we need to tweak that. That's fine, but when you actually dig into the plan, you will see that there is a rubric that's suggested for you, a way for you to actually compare, not only how do the projects that we're looking at, how do they align with our strategic priorities, but how do they fit in with our time considerations, how do they tie in with our budget constraints, and how does it match with the capacity and resources that we have in this moment right now. And so that tool will be available to you so that you can actually, kind of test your projects and really decide what are we going to move on now, what's going to be next, and then so on. There's also a component that will help you to, kind of put those into a framework over time with short-term opportunities, midterm, and long-term. And so now I think Alex is going to take on the first priority project.
So I'm just going to run through these pretty quickly for business attraction, workforce, and infrastructure. But like Kate mentioned, we broke these out into short-term, mid-term, and long-term. Things that we think could be accomplished, but of course, this needs to be something that you guys assess as well. In the short term, we thought it'd be really helpful to develop a website.
Hey, Alex. Can you speak a little bit louder?
Sure.
Thank you.
So in the short term, we thought it'd be good for you all to develop a website for economic development. We were able to collect a lot of this information, so it's something that you're going to essentially be able to copy and paste and to build out a website. And that's something that you can do for pretty minimal cost and not something that you'll need to spend a ton of time or money on. The next thing that we have here in the midterm is creating a business prospect for lead management database. Again, this is something that can be more of a spreadsheet, or if you're wanting to use a CRM system, you could go with something like Salesforce or something related to track any sort of businesses in the area. And that would be existing businesses as well as those who might be interested in expanding or relocating. And then in the long term, and one that I think will be the most impactful, of course, is establishing a business retention and expansion program using some of the techniques and tools that we had mentioned previously. For workforce, we've got a few here. At a baseline, understanding business needs is going to be critical. We've said that a number of times. So establishing industry advisory boards are really helpful to just kind of get an understanding of any sort of workforce challenges, special skills that our existing businesses are needing, and that can really help inform, any sort of training providers, higher education to support some of those skills development. In the midterm, and some of this also will be pulled from, past plans, but supporting the implementation of the Pathways to Prosperity career tracks. We know that we've got a couple, but maybe there's also an opportunity to explore new career track opportunities. And then lastly, looking at the county's Hispanic and Latino population and being able to engage with them in a meaningful way so that they can also, enter some workforce training, enter the workforce, and hopefully get on a quality career pipeline. The long-term project that you'll see is in reference to establishing Surrey and Works type program. That seems to be working incredibly well for them, and sort of takes that regional approach that we're really, encouraging here. And I think, is really important to consider too when you look at labor shed and the labor market and what companies are actually looking at. They're not looking at, our boundaries that we put together. They're looking at who can realistically drive in and work at our company. Last thing from me for infrastructure, this is something that we can do tomorrow, and that is looking at creating an inventory of brownfield sites. These exist all over the country, but fortunately there is no cost technical assistance that can be offered to do something like this at a minimum through ICMA, who works with EPA on some of these issues. But we could also look at going after a brownfields environmental assessment, a brownfields assessment grant to help conduct environmental assessments so we can start to get moving forward on some of the redevelopment that we might want to do in the community. in the midterm, and we know that this has been a lingering priority, but being able to conduct a feasibility study for the Greenway project that you have in your area, working with North Carolina Department of Transportation to push that through, which I know can take time, which is why we put it as a midterm project. Lastly, in the long term, looking to rehabilitate your wastewater treatment plant. Those, of course, can be very expensive. They can be time consuming, but with all the infrastructure money that is coming down now, we still think that that's something that could be explored earlier on. It just might take a little bit longer to actually implement. And I'll hand it off to Libby.
All right, we're in the red zone now, I promise. We're real close. Okay, so in this final piece, quality of place, the 3 priority projects that we have identified, and again, there's so many things that can fall in the bucket of quality of place. The short term, develop a temporary wayfinding signage strategy to highlight amenities, everyday amenities, as well as points of interest. Even talking to some people in the community who've been here a very long time, it was like, oh, I didn't know that was there, or this is over here. Wayfinding can be very expensive, and I understand that there is a process happening right now with tourism. Sometimes it can take a very long time. They can be very beautifully designed and come with a hefty price tag, so it might take a while to get funding. In the meantime, I have a recommendation for an organization that you can get really beautiful, clean signs put up very, very, very low cost, and they can be incredibly valuable, as well as a win, right? Like, you're looking for wins. You're looking for things to say, like, we're getting stuff done, right? So that can be a good temporary solution until you can get the long-term ones put up. Midterm, thinking about housing, and housing was something that came up consistently as a major challenge. Begin establishing the land bank, which we've talked about before in the last planning process, and there's all of it is well written out on the action steps on how to build the land bank. Get properties back into active use. Get buildings updated, stop blight, get properties with families back in them. Long-term solutions, develop the Creative Center. This is the Cultural Creative Center. Again, was a priority in the past. Seems like it is still a priority based on public input that we're hearing. To be able to connect and support all these incredible artists and creatives that you have in this community. You already have this beautiful culture. Let's figure out ways to really bring it together and support it and elevate it. And I also put on here investing in the trails. We just talked about that in infrastructure, because trails federally falls under infrastructure, but being able to utilize trails and connectivity within your community is a really valuable quality of place indicator for residents, as well as tourists and visitors. And so the Bledsoe Creek project, as well as the Mountain to Sea Trail, great opportunities long-term. I know for the state of North Carolina, this was the year of the trails, and hopefully I think there's going to be a lot more money coming next year, but you're never going to get the money unless you have a plan, unless you have it as a priority. So these are the ones that we're recommending, and again, these are all of our recommendations. It's up to you to decide what goes into the final plan. But as Kate said, you can do everything, you just can't do it at once. So we have a vision, which is where you're going. We have a plan, which is how you'll get there. And we have a rubric to be able to evaluate, because plans are great, but they have to be flexible. So if something amazing pops up next month, next year, 2 years, and you say, well, Libby, that does not fall under my plan, we cannot do this. We have to be able to be flexible to be able to take advantage of great opportunities when they present themselves. So we wanted to write this plan to set you up for success, to be authentically Alleghany. I've been waiting all night to say that. And to be healthy, prosperous, and resilient. So that concludes our presentation. That was as close as I could possibly get. And our next steps will be, we will send you the final plan so that you can read through it at your leisure. And then we'll give you a week or two or whatever you recommend to be able to review. The most important things we're going to need your feedback on are the priority projects and making sure that this is what you want, because the final step of this planning process is these are all great ideas, but the money has to come from somewhere, and you have to have the planning pieces. We're not going to do all the research on the funding until we know what you want to focus on. So we'll need your feedback on those pieces, and then we'll put together the final plan and send it back to you in August. I'll work with Ryan on the dates. Thank you so much for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Libby. I'll go ahead and start with any questions that the council may have. Town council, do you have any questions for Libby or anyone on her staff at this time?
When you were looking at this, and you're looking at the regional, were you just looking at North Carolina? I'm thinking we're a lot like Independence in Grayson County, and that there might be some possibilities for some regional aspects between the two towns.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did have comparison communities when we were looking at the data, and I don't remember exactly what those communities were.
Independence was included as a comparison community for Sparta and Alleghany County. Just to draw, in terms of size and amenities that you have. And so that is outlined a little bit more in the community assessment, more so than the actual plan. But I think that's a great idea of seeing what other.
I mean, I'm thinking, when I think regional, you know, you think of Ash, and Alleghany, and Wilkes, and Surrey, and those areas. But we've been real successful with the water project in cooperating with Virginia. And they have a lot of the same qualities, same needs, same things that we have. So I'm sitting here thinking, why not begin to look at a region that's not just North Carolina?
Sorry.
That's my comment.
Miss Libby, if you will, you did interviews with folks. How many people did you talk to?
It's all in the community assessment. I'd have to go back and take a look at it.
Ballpark.
Well, we had quite a lot of people show up to focus groups. We had individual, and I really couldn't guess.
Was it 12? Was it 20? Was it 150?
Well, in these conversations we had, some of the focus groups were 20-some people. Some were much smaller. And then I had some individual conversations. And then we had public input from our previous process, which was quite a lot on the public survey.
Between the two projects, it would be 100, if not more.
That you actually spoke with?
Yes.
And just for conversation's sake, and certainly I met with you and had a very nice conversation, and there was a very small group of me there. But that's okay, I had the floor. But that, and then the survey you said, and that was filled out predominantly by people that actually didn't live in the town of Sparta, I think, correct me if I'm wrong. But there wasn't any documentation that, and I'm just speaking for Sparta because this certainly affects everybody. But if I remember correctly, a lot of those respondents weren't actually town residents, which is fine, the survey was for everybody. Do you recall any?
I don't know that that's true, but we can go back and look, because we had the survey 2 years ago, and it was open to everybody, residents.
I may be thinking of some other survey we did.
So there's been a
Are
lot
you
of.
speaking of the county, the
The town did one.
we did a public survey with the first project, but then we also sent a survey to government officials, as
Right,
in you
right.
all, that
But we had one on our website, Ryan, wasn't that in the past year, that was open for everybody, but that was not necessarily part of their thing, that was different? Oh, excuse me, that was different. We have so many surveys. So you did talk to at least 100 people.
between the two projects. yes.
Right, and that's a good number, and that's a good number, but I was curious about that. And you did mention at one point about a website, and I think we have numerous websites already in place, but apparently, from what you're saying, you couldn't find adequate information. You said you Googled extensively, et cetera, and so you didn't find adequate information on the existing websites, which is creative criticism. I wouldn't say criticism as much as stating a fact. So one of your main priorities was to set up yet another website. I just want to make sure I understood that you understood there were numerous websites out there.
Yeah, and the new website could be very simple. It could be a convener.
Oh, yes,
It
you're
could
right.
just be pointing to the other places. But,
And true.
I mean, yeah, it's annoying to add another website. I understand that.
Well, it's not annoying if the ones
But
we have
it's-
are ineffectual.
Yeah, if you're trying to make sure that the information is available for people, whether I have,
Easily.
yes,
You know, I
100%.
love the little smartphone, and you put in something and all this information, and being a nerd and someone that loves information. So what you're saying is truly something we need to hear. We need someplace where somebody can go and put in Alleghany County, Town of Sparta, boom, and there it is.
Yep.
And then one thing you mentioned, our past successes, and certainly there's been a lot of things done, but one point that I have noticed myself, and we discussed this, the streetscape was a wonderful idea, and it was promoted, and it was a wonderful idea, and it was implemented. But one of the downsides to that was it put one of our major downtown businesses in an economically indefensive position, and they closed. So I would hesitate to label things successes when there was things that weren't successful. But that's just throwing that out there. We have had great successes. Our town manager and our mayor, and I'm just speaking for the town, were successful in getting a massive amount of money, and infrastructure and things that had been left undone for some time have been addressed and are being addressed, not the least of which is our wastewater treatment plant. Kudos to them. Of course, we're supportive. But there's been a lot of good things done since our new manager's come on board, and of course the streetscape is over, so we could get back to the business of taking care of our town. And thanks to the legislature and other people, we had money to do that. So I'd like to stick up for us a little bit on the infrastructure, that we are full steam ahead, as they say in the nautical world, on making sure that our infrastructure is top-notch.
Yep.
And I'll shut up and let somebody else talk.
If you want to ask the commissioners if they want to do anything there?
John, any questions?
Yes, just background. You mentioned the Alleghany County Economic Development Committee. What information did you receive on that?
So it wasn't, we did not receive a lot of information. We found the articles of incorporation. We, kind of did some checking to see that the organization is still viable, just with, tax records and things like that. And then we did have a conversation just with one of the board members to confirm that it is still, that it's still functioning, that it still exists.
Did they advise you that they had not met for over 10 years?
No, well, and that was the question, was to dig in and understand why, and is to say, is it something that could
What other
be stood back up?
economic development organization were you aware of in Alleghany County?
That's the only one that we found a record of.
You were not aware, no one
Besides
advised
the
you that the Business Development Center, their contract
Oh.
also called to do economic development, but they didn't?
Yeah, no, we were aware, yes, we do know that and I'll actually defer to, Megan and Libby, who have been a little bit more involved, but yes, so that the chamber, there was some funding allocated to the chamber to serve in that role, and then that the BDC is in charge of supporting business. But there's a broader economic development context that can be represented through a broader lens. And so when you look at the purpose and the mission and the intention of the ACEDC, it is much broader in scope. And so I think if the chamber is a realistic entity to continue doing that work or to have that work, I think that's a great opportunity. Anything that's already existing and functioning is a resource. But the idea that there was this organization that literally had that mission of supporting economic development for all of the county, if it is still there, it's worth exploring to figure out if it's if it's still a going
That
concern.
mission was on the Chamber of Commerce for 3 years. I believe it was the Chamber of Economic Development, which they've recently given up. So I agree with you, and I've been preaching it. We've got to have someone that's going to be focused on economic development, but I said that it needs to be county government. The entities that I've just addressed to you are all 501c3s, so that the county gave money, but we could not control their actions. And unfortunately, we haven't got much to show for it, in my opinion. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle?
I just want to thank you for your efforts. We need to work together on this. The town and the county. Good things, good plans.
I think, I like the presentation. I would like a hard copy if we could get one. Almost all of this was new to this board. We haven't been involved in any of it up to this point. So I've got a page full of questions, but I'd rather be able to go back and read the hard copy and where I can ask those questions, maybe at a different time, a different meeting. One thing that I think you highlighted in several places was, what is our workforce development? How many people can we put into a job right now? If a business opened up and needed 25 people, I'm afraid we're pushed to find 25 qualified people. And then the infrastructure. We don't have a industrial park. You mentioned, I think you called it brown field or something. But we don't have that industrial park. There's a lot of communities that have put a lot of money into industrial parks, and they're just sitting there empty right now. The economy is nothing to brag about at this time. The interest rates are sky high, and it may be a while before they come back down. But I would be interested in seeing a hard copy of your presentation. And I thank you all for the time, and I'm sure you put a lot of effort into it, and it was very enlightening. Mr. Carter, do you have any comments? April, you're hiding out back there. I'll turn it back over to Mayor Breniger.
With the council and the commissioners giving their comments, and we got all that out of the way, I'm going to let the Sparta Town Manager, Ryan Wilmuth, take over from here, and he's going to address some stuff here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Town Council, Board of Commissioners. I have several comments, but looking out over the crowd, there are a lot of community stakeholders here that, quite honestly, without these folks, we would not be where we're at. They have contributed, they have given of their time without pay, and there's a lot of talent and a lot of critical people here. So they also give input to the plan. So real quick, I just want to ask if any of those folks have comments.
Come up to the microphone, please.
If you have any comments that want to come up, we'll give you a couple minutes because we don't want to extend it out for another hour or so, but give you about 2 minutes there to voice your opinion.
I'm Barbara Halsey, and I just volunteer for the community, but I just want to praise you all. I think this is the most positive thing we are doing for our community. And I speak with Michelle when I say we must work together, because that's the only way we're going to go forward. And change is coming. We just have to direct that change in the right way. And thank you all so much.
just from the presentation, I just have
Go ahead and tell me your name and everything.
Matthew Williamson. I own Williamson Mead and Brewing, the new winery in Glade Valley. Thank you all for the opportunity to ask a couple questions. How do we avoid dilution of our county's interests if we attach ourselves to a regional organization? How important is our independence and how important is our individual culture here in Alleghany? We don't suffer from some of the same problems as some of the other counties do. I noticed that they mentioned railway 3 and 4 times during the presentation. Well, we're not blessed with one. It makes me wonder if they're aware if we have one or not. And 2 is, how do we avoid the hook of federal funds? If the government decides that those funds are attached to particular policies, the government's been moving towards net zero and has been rather negative about agriculture recently. It is our major backbone of economy here. If we accept federal funds and attach ourselves to these federal programs, will they then dictate what our farmers are going to be able to do, and will those goals be set by that? Those are just 2 concerns that I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Let's come to the podium and give your name.
Again, thank you for having this today. It's really wonderful to hear everybody and actually see everybody at work here. I'm Lila Foro. I'm an attorney. I'm a disability attorney. I represent people in the community getting Social Security disability benefits and veterans compensation. That's all I've done for years. And I'd just like to comment on how it encourages me to hear that there could be a plan for housing, in particular for here, because I know from just my clients that that's the hardest thing for people. People need a place to live that's safe and affordable, and anything we can do with this plan to push that forward will make me really happy, and I think that will make a huge difference to our community. Thank you.
Anybody else? Being no further movement, you have anything else, Ryan, that you'd like to address? I'll let you have the mic.
Yeah. First, thanks to Libby, Megan, Alex, if you're still there, Kate, for presenting a year-long plan in an hour for your work. We have spent extensive time, talking. You guys have done an immense amount of research, and I should have rolled the, population sign up by 2 for Megan and Libby, because y'all have truly invested 2 years in this community. So thank you for putting that together. Commissioners, thank you for taking the time to meet with us and hear this. I've thought a lot about what I would say. Through the past couple months, as it's been mentioned, economic development, the partnerships that we had, they've evolved, and I fear they've evolved to the detriment of our town and county. So it is left up to us to pick that ball up and drive the change we want to see. And Barbara must have read my note, but there is no such thing as standing still or it's going to stay the way it's always been. I moved here, I'm invested here, and this is a great place to live, but it's not always going to be the same. So it's up to us to drive that change. And we have to get past our personal bias, our own agendas, our dislike of certain people, and we have to work together. I've heard it a million times. What's good for the town is good for the county, and what's good for the county is good for the town. If we don't start living that and get deeper than surface level, this plan does not mean a hill of beans. And I find myself in a unique position. When you get a death sentence, you look at things a little different. So I recognize this plan will likely outlive me, but in reality, the actions we take or don't take, it's going to outlive all of us. So I encourage everybody in this room, work together for Alleghany County, town of Sparta. We got to get past whatever is in the past and look for a future, or there's not going to be a future. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Carter, do you have any comments?
There is absolutely no way that I could top what Ryan just said. Usually he comments that I will kick the ball off and he'll bring it back down the sideline. But today, Ryan, you have done both. So I will defer to anyone else because I have nothing that could say anything more important than what the town manager just said.
Thank you. And we've had comments from the commissioners. Anything? Go ahead, Timmy.
Yes, can you hear me now? Yeah, first of all is the ladies that's put all this work in. That's a lot of, really do appreciate the efforts put in. I actually had an opportunity to speak to one to talk about some different things myself. But I can, since I'm sort of the freshman commissioner and rookie at that, a couple things that I've seen evolve in time, and I can see in the future, because of some things that's happened over the last few months, of the county, as John is saying, that we are going to have to look into trying to put together our own economic development, because a group, which somebody to head it up, because we're finding that, some of these other groups, we can't invest in it for years, and then all of a sudden the group says, well, we're not going to do that anymore. So we've got some work to do. I realize that. We've got to, there's things that I think that's something that we're working on. I also agree that there's a lot of things that Sparta and the county can work together on. I do agree with that. And actually, when I first became commissioner, I felt like, that was an important goal of my own. But to bring up, and this is an example of something I really believe that, and I don't know what the reasons was for it, but when I was going through the budget process, which is something is my deal that I do every day in life, I realized that for whatever reason, and this is one instant that doesn't help, that working in that interest of working together, is I realized that for about 20 years, town has invested in the dispatch office for whatever reason, the good reason or whatever, but for whatever reason, which I didn't really get any kind of reason, that stopped. It wasn't cut back, it was stopped. So, and again, I'm completely open to ideas and thoughts and processes and willing to work with anybody, anyway, anyhow. But it's got to be both ways. And I'm still open to ideas and still listen to anybody's idea that they may have to move forward. Anything that could be, whether it's Sparta, Alleghany. I know we've talked a lot about Sparta, and I know that everything, you know, whether it's infrastructure or wastewater or, and there's a lot of things that happens in Sparta, but there's a lot of things that happens out in the county. For instance, you know, I don't, which they brought up one thing about trades, which is something we've talked about to the school about, is we have a lack of tradesmen, whether it's electricians, plumbers, heat and HVAC, which we talked to schools about. That is something that I think they're working on. But there's other things happening outside the county when you talk about industries, whether it's folks like talking about housing. You got to have people to build the houses, and you got to have people that knows how to do those trades. And there's a large part of out in the county that they have 20 people. I have 8. I've had as many as 15 at one time. So all those different parts play a part in the economic development of Alleghany County. And I do realize that Alleghany, or Sparta, is not in another country. It's in Alleghany, and it is our county seat. And so I realize that, you know, it's important to incorporate them as we move forward. But I do think of our experiences we've had lately, I think we're moving towards, we need to set up some kind of way that we have control of to some degree, but at the same time, getting the right people in the right position that has some knowledge of economic development running that operation. But that's all I had to say. But again, I really appreciate everybody showing up and even interested in this, because it is an important part of our day-to-day things here in Alleghany.
Thank you, Timmy.
You're welcome.
Mayor Bruniger.
Well, I'm just going to, the privilege of going last is everybody has already took everything you had to say. And the town manager read my notes. Don't fool nobody. No, I'm just kidding. Our job as elected officials is to make sure that we prepare our citizens for the future. Quit living in the past and proceed to the future. When we harbor all these ill feelings that's happened in the past and things that have happened, we're not going to get anywhere. You can't dig streetscape up and replace it back with the old street. You can't do it. It's there, and it's going to stay there. We can't dig up the old things about it's the county versus the town or the town versus the county. Let it go. You've got to work together. Our job is to prepare a place that is better than what we inherited it. Bottom line, number one. And if you're sitting here and you're an elected official and that's not your number one agenda, you need to step down. You just can't keep beating the dead horse. We cannot keep standing status quo. They've given us a plan here, and that's a lot of work that you guys have put into it, have put into that, and it's very appreciative. We have a lot of volunteers that stand right here in this audience right now. They have dedicated their lives and years of their knowledge and money and funds and time to try to make a difference in our community, whether it be a paid job or a 501c3 or just an organization that's out here trying to do something good. These people are out here trying to make it better for each and every one of us. So I tip my hat to each and every volunteer that's ever done anything for this town or this county. Nothing gets done around here without volunteers. I'm just telling you point blank. Now, I don't know if the ladies here at Atlas have ever worked in such a small county. We have 1,800 people in the town, and we have 11,000 people in the county. That's not a lot of revenue coming in to do a whole lot of anything, anywhere. Our workforce is slim, And the businesses that we do have, a lot of people don't support because I call it the Walmart syndrome. We're 30 minutes away from Walmart. So instead of coming to town to support our local business, everybody goes in a different direction. That hurts. So how do we combat that? There's all kinds of stuff that we can do, but it's up to our citizens and our people of our county if we're going to support our local merchants. Bottom line, they're here year-round. Tourists are not going to be here 12 months out the year. We're here for what, 6 to 8 months? So it's our local people. We've got to cater to our local people to get them to shop in our businesses, to take care of our local merchants. That's first and foremost. As an elected official, it's our job to be out here helping promote our local businesses, trying to bring people in here. Number one, I think I've been a pretty good advocate for the whole county. I'm trying to invite everybody. Anybody I was in the Marine Corps with, I've invited them to come to Sparta. Anybody. So, hey, let's just keep the work going. I think as a group, and as everyone in this room, like the town manager said, we've got to work together. Bottom line, drop whatever vendetta you got against anything, drop any agenda that you come into this room with, and have an open mind and say, what can we do to make this work? So that being said, council members, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn our meeting.
Before you do,
Okay?
I think you presented a lot of good information. I think Bobby has a real good point in saying that a hard copy for them would be very necessary and critical. I think it would be wise if we set another meeting after that hard copy has gotten here and had time to study it, to sit down and discuss how we're going to implement that as a town and a county, and how we can do some of the things John wants, and how some of the things in the progress thing. I think it's important that we get together and we have frank and earnest conversation and discuss things that are mutually beneficial to both. So I'll just say that.
If I could respond to that, sorry. Atlas is very happy to sit in on that meeting to answer any questions that you may all have about this after you've had time to review. We just typically like to present it first so it doesn't feel potentially as overwhelming, or so you don't have to read such a long document in preparation for the
I think
meeting.
if the managers got together, discussed it with the commissioners, set a time, maybe next month or sometime like that, where we can sit down together. You can call it a work session, you can call it anything you want, but it needs to be a time when there's an open and honest discussion and things get said that should be said.
Okay, so I have a motion, and do I have a second on the adjournment for the town council?
Second.
I have a second. All in favor, show of hands. And now I'll turn it over to the commissioner.
Need a motion to adjourn in a second. All those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed likewise? We are adjourned.
Thank you everyone for
Thank
coming out.
all of you.
Thank you. And we'd also like to thank the county for allowing us to use your facilities today. Thank you, guys.
You know what? We got more to talk about that.